Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Chair of the Municipal Employer Pension Centre of Ontario and AMO past President, Doug Raycraft.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be with you on stage this afternoon at this AMO conference. It's been a delight to see so many familiar faces over the last couple of days. I am currently the chair of the Municipal Employers Pension Centre of Ontario, or MEPCO, the organization created by AMO to fulfill its responsibilities as a sponsor of the OMERS plan. Most of Ontario's municipalities are members of MEPCO, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your support of MEPCO and the important work that it does on your behalf. I'm here today to introduce Paul Harrietha, Chief Executive Officer of the OMERS Sponsors Corporation. But first, I want to take a moment to acknowledge three important members of the board of the OMERS Sponsors Corporation who are here in the audience. Maybe they just stand and wave when they're introduced. Marianne Love is appointed to the Sponsors Corporation Board by AMO and is co-chair of the Sponsors Corporation Board. Her fellow co-chair is Frank Ramagnano, President of the Ontario Professional Firefighters Association. And also with us today we have Barry Brown, also appointed by AMO as a member of the Sponsors Corporation Board. We welcome you and thank you for being here today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Paul Harrietha, who will present information on the comprehensive plan review that is currently underway at OMERS and highlight some of the key challenges facing OMERS' long-term sustainability. Paul Harrietha is responsible for providing executive leadership and direction to the employees of the OMERS Sponsors Corporation. This includes helping the board deliver on its key responsibilities related to plan design, contributions, stabilization reserves, and sponsor and stakeholder relations. Prior to his appointment as Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Harrietha was a senior principal at Eckler Limited, a leading actuarial consulting firm in Canada, and is the former chair of Abilico Global, a network of independent actuarial consulting firms operating in some 20 countries worldwide. Please join me in welcoming Paul Harrietha.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Welcome. We figured there'd be a bigger crowd as you were trying to get better seats for the upcoming forum, but we'll make the most of where we are today. On behalf of the OMERS Sponsors Corporation and behalf of OMERS, the management team, I want to welcome you to today's session on the Comprehensive Plan Review. Very much appreciate the opportunity to bring you up to speed on what it is we've been doing over the past 8 months and helping to tell the OMERS story. So as we begin to talk and begin to work through the presentation, I'm going to touch on 4 primary themes or messages that I hope will resonate with you as we continue the discussions today. The first is necessity. We believe that the Comprehensive Plan Review is a necessary undertaking. It is in fact the first full review of the plan undertaken in the past 50 years. And as we know, much has changed, particularly in this sector, since the plan was introduced in 1962. The second theme, or message, is thoroughness. I want to assure you that over the past 8 months, we've been working with external experts to conduct a very thorough analysis using sophisticated modeling tools and techniques. We're comfortable that the analysis that's been undertaken is bulletproof, and that we are willing and able to share that with our sponsors as we go forward so that people can assess the appropriateness of the undertaking. The third is revealing. What we have come to conclude, based on the modeling that we've undertaken, is that we do have a sustainability issue, certainly an affordability issue as we move forward. And the last one is comforting. Comforted in the fact that the analysis that's been undertaken and the resulting plan changes that have been proposed by the board will take us a long way to providing sustainability under the plan over the long term, and will allow us to do that while providing top-tier benefits to our members as we move forward. So with that in mind, let's jump into the review itself. So we'll begin with the two fundamental questions that I typically get asked when we start talking about the review. And the first one is why? The second one is why now? And the why is fairly simple. It's our job. Under the OMERS Sponsors Corporation, we have an obligation to review the plan on a regular basis and to suggest changes or other implementation components that are either advisable or necessary given the state of the plan. So if you think or look at the chart in front of you, you'll see that the OMERS that you know is actually comprised of two separate corporations with two separate and distinct boards of directors. The Sponsors Corporation handles what I like to call the ABCs of the OMERS world. We're responsible for appointing the directors to both boards. Now, those appointments are nominated by the sponsors of the organization and allow for representation, equal representation in a jointly trusted environment between member representatives and employer representatives. We're also responsible, as per the comprehensive plan review, for recommending benefit changes and contribution changes. The other side of the fence, the OMERS Administration Corporation manages the operational day-to-day components of OMERS. That includes things like administration, communication, investment, legal, government relations, and other elements. And our job is to work collectively for the membership to ensure that the plan remains sustainable, meaningful, and affordable over time. So that's the why. We're fulfilling our obligations. The why now becomes a little more interesting. Now, the flippant answer to why now is because we didn't do it 10 years ago when we ran into some financial difficulties following the 2008 market meltdown. The honest answer is that the plan has some financial vulnerabilities today and vulnerabilities that we think will get exacerbated based on some of the issues and challenges that we face going forward. Now, we all know that the past 2 years have been very positive years from an OMERS perspective. Double-digit returns in both of those years, which have been a very good thing for the plan, certainly good for you as individuals if you have AVCs. That is a very positive element, and we now find ourselves with $95 billion plus in assets approaching $100 billion by the end of the year. Solid footing. But the reality, if we think about it and look at our annual report, is that despite these short-term gains, short-term successes, we still remain underfunded as a plan. We're 94% funded as of the end of last year, and we've maintained that funded status and improved it over the past few years, but many of those gains and improvements have been fueled by the highest contribution rates in the history of the plan. We now are working under a combined contribution rate of 21.3%, which is a lot of money any way you look at it. One of our sponsors recently noted that the OMERS plan has done better than any other pension plan. Now, we don't know what criteria were used, but what we do know, if we look at data that was compiled, publicly available data that was compiled and analyzed by an external third party, is that OMERS, unfortunately, is the only plan among our peers, the jointly trusteed major plans in Ontario, who is currently in an underfunded position. That is, who has liabilities that exceed our assets. As you can see, as of this date, we're about $5.4 billion underfunded compared to HOOP at the other end of the program that has a surplus of $13.2 billion. Now, I will accept that these are different reporting mechanisms, different reporting issues. This is not total apples to oranges or apples to apples, but it does give us a sense of where we stand within the pecking order from a funded position. Not the best. This is exacerbated by the fact that we also use the highest discount rate to calculate our liabilities. Now, the discount rate is a sort of a complex actuarial methodology that basically determines or values the liabilities that we have as a plan. But in technical terms, it is the anticipated long-term rate of return less a margin for adverse events In practical terms, what it does is determine how much you're going to recognize of your liabilities today and how much risk you're going to push onto future generations. The relationship here is that the higher your discount rate, the lower the liabilities you recognize. The lower discount rate, the higher the liabilities. So if we're looking at our 6% liability or discount rate, if we were to normalize that, that is to put it in line with our other members, we would see our liabilities increase quite dramatically, and therefore our funded status erode even further. The issue is for every 5 basis point drop in a discount rate leads to a $750 million increase in our liabilities. So if we did normalize, we would see that our unfunded position is closer to $10 billion rather than the $5 billion that we're looking at. We also recognize that we're going to face some headwinds. These are realities that we can't escape and that are largely beyond our control. And what we need to do is to understand how these headwinds are likely to impact our plan going forward. Now, the most dramatic of the headwinds is what we call plan maturity. So in the plan 1976, we essentially had 9 active members for every 1 retiree. Lots of contributions flowing into the plan, very few payments flowing out of the plan. Today, we're closer to 2 to 1, and by the mid-2030s, we expect that we will have a 1-to-1 ratio of active members to retired members. Now, that creates issues for the plan, with fewer members contributing to make up for potential investment losses over time. The plan certainly becomes more vulnerable to shocks or economic downturns. It also intensifies the likelihood of what is called negative cash flows. So today, we are at a point where, as of next year, we will actually be paying out more in benefits than we collect in contributions each year, which puts some additional pressures on the plan as we move forward. The second key headwind that we're facing is longevity. Now, again, from a personal perspective, that's a good thing. As our CFO likes to say, congratulations, ladies and gentlemen, you're becoming immortal. And that's a good thing from a human perspective, a difficult thing from a pension perspective. Someone retiring under the plan in 1963 could expect to collect a pension for 12 years beyond their retirement date. 2016, that was about 24 years, and by 2046, we're not entirely sure, but we anticipate that we're going to see far more members, and we're seeing it today, collecting pensions for far longer than they were active members of the plan. Now, a good thing from an individual perspective, but it's obviously a very costly element to a pension plan and has implications from a management perspective. The third headwind we face is the workforce trends. We conducted a study recently with Deloitte who looked at a number of potential factors that would influence our membership, everything from disruptive technologies to changing social trends to changing employment trends to privatization. And they came across what they considered 3 scenarios, good, bad, and ugly. The good says that we will continue to grow our membership, but at lower rates than we currently do. The ugly gets us to about a 30% reduction in our membership by about 2035. Now, this is problematic again in that any decline in membership that we see intensifies the maturity issues that we just talked about, makes the plan more susceptible to those shocks that we talked about, and leads to a greater differentiation between the contributions coming into the plan and the benefits going out. So again, not necessarily a bad thing from a member perspective, but certainly an impact on the plan. We're also concerned about the economics as we move forward. So we talked about our funded status and that we had $95 billion in the plan, call it $100 billion. That is cash on or assets on hand. If we just sum all of our obligations under the plan earned to date, we owe about $300 billion in pensions. That's what is owing to the members that we have today, which means that we're putting a significant bet on our capacity to invest ourselves out of that problem. We're putting real pressure on the investment folks to make up that $200 billion delta. What it works out to is that we now have to earn $6 billion a year just to break even, and as we move forward, we will have to earn beyond those levels if we're going to manage the plan as we currently are today. The concern is that our economists economists around the world tell us that that's going to become much harder to do, particularly as the world's population ages. We simply won't be able to generate the returns that we have done historically, and we need to manage the plan more effectively around that. And the last headwind, or perhaps not headwind in this case, but reality is that Canada Pension Plan enhancements begin in 2019, which is going to increase benefits, which is a very positive thing for members, but it will also increase costs and benefits or costs for both members and employers. And given that our plan is currently integrated with the CPP, the question becomes, do we add these costs and benefits simply on top of what we have now, or do we rethink the plan and seek to integrate this in a more meaningful and positive way so that we can manage some of those contribution increases from both a member and employer perspective, but still ensure that members are getting benefits out of the enhanced CPP in the years ahead. So those are the challenges. And not to worry, the sky isn't falling. We just need to be conscious as we move forward that what has been is not going to be, and that as we move forward, we need to be understanding of the implications of these potential plan change, or the impacts of these forces as we move forward. And this led us to the analysis. So the analysis tells us, through the modeling that was done by our third-party provider, 5,000 scenarios, very involved modeling, is that our plan costs will increase steadily over time and significantly under some cases. How significantly? Well, the modeling tells us that our current normal cost, or at least the normal cost in 2020, normal cost being the cost of the benefits actually being provided from the plan, is about 17.7% of pay. By 2035, doing nothing else, that will be 20.1% of pay, and by 2050, 22.5% of pay. So those are just the costs of the benefits. If we add margins on top of that to deal with the risk factors that we just talked about, we know that our contributions are going to exceed 22.6 over time. We're thinking that those contributions are going to raise to between 24 and 30% on a combined basis, so 12 to 15% for both members and employers. And that there is, in fact, a remote chance, and it is remote, just 5%, that combined contributions could reach 37% by 2050. That's a big number, and it's something we think we have to protect against, both from a member perspective and from the employer perspective, and that's largely why we're conducting the review. We think that reality leaves us with three options from a design perspective. One is to keep the plan as it is, but to ask people to pay more for that coverage, and as we said, potentially significantly more as we move forward. To keep contribution levels at current rates, but cut benefits to ensure that we can continue to afford them in that environment, or to modernize the plan, and that is look for some meaningful compromise that ensures we're providing the best possible benefits on a guaranteed base to our members, but potentially introduce some levers that give us some flexibility from a financial management perspective and ensure that we can continue to provide sustainable, meaningful, and affordable benefits over time. Now, depending on the constituents you talk to and depending on your particular age at any given point and your nearness to retirement, you might have a different perspective on which is the right way to go, 1, 2, or 3. What we do know from a lot of discussions with our sponsor groups, outreach to members, and other elements is that there seems to be a fairly limited tolerance for raising contribution rates substantially beyond where they are now. So that largely leaves us with option 3 as a go-to from a design standpoint. Given that, the organization, the board, over 8 months, turned over essentially every stone that we possibly could from a design. We looked at everything, going back to basics, to fully understand what the cost impact of every potential benefit is under the plan, and to determine what is meaningful given the trends, given the data that we're seeing as we move forward. What the board has landed on are 6 potential plan changes that we're providing for consultation purposes. These are not baked. These are not finalized in any way, shape, or form. These are just the 6 components that the board overwhelmingly agreed to take to the broader membership for consultation purposes. On the one side are changes to particular benefits, the one being the introduction of conditional indexing rather than guaranteed indexing, the other being the introduction of a tweak to the early retirement provisions under the plan. On the flip side, the board is considering the potential implementation of mandatory coverage for non-full-time members, which will obviously have a cost impact on employers as we move forward, and the allowing for the paramedics and allowing for paramedics to negotiate NRA 60 benefits under the plan. That is allowing them to negotiate benefits that would allow them to retire at age 60 rather than 65 as we move forward. Then they also looked at two other, what we'll call administrative changes. One is to look at changing the integration formula to adopt the enhanced CPP elements, and one is to remove the 35-year service cap. So we'll take a minute now and just go into those in a little more detail. So the big decision, the big impact element, is this proposal to change from guaranteed indexing at an effective date to conditional indexing. Now, as you probably know, under the current plan, as a retiree, your pension is increased annually while it's in pay to reflect changes in the inflation rate within Canada to a maximum of 6% and then carry forward beyond that. What we're suggesting going forward is not de-indexing in any way, shape, or form, not reducing or eliminating indexing to pensions and pay, but to tying the indexing provided to the plan for service earned after an effective date to the financial health of the plan. The intent is to provide full indexing, and the hope is that we'll be able to provide full indexing. But if the plan runs into a financial problem, we would have the capacity as a board to reduce or to restrict indexing on a temporary basis until the plan fully recovers. So again, not eliminating indexing altogether, but at least providing some mechanism, some lever, some safety valve to the board that could manage the financial health of the plan should a negative downward event occur at some point in the future. We're also seeing with the decision around the indexing is that it provides some level of intergenerational equity, and that as it turns out now, any significant payments would accrue to active members of the plan only. At some point, if we introduce conditional indexing, then retirees would share in the pain to some degree if the plan finds itself in a very difficult financial state. The second change that we were looking at is simply the administrative change that allows us to integrate more closely with the CPP. Many of us think that OMERS is a 2% plan. I receive 2% of my best average earnings in retirement. Really, it's an integrated plan. So that 2% includes the benefit you receive from CPP. Really, you earn 1.35% of your earnings up to a certain limit each year and 2% over. All we're suggesting is that 1.325 would apply to a slightly higher level of earnings that aligns more closely with the enhanced CPP that we're looking at. The positive here is that this will help to mitigate the contribution increases for both members and employers, but it will, at the end of the day, provide higher combined benefit for the member than they're currently receiving under the current provisions. One of the issues that's received sort of, or generated the most feedback, shall I say, is a proposed change to the early retirement provisions. So under the current plan is that members will receive a significantly subsidized pension if they achieve certain thresholds within the plan. That is, they can retire to an unreduced pension at age 30, or if they have 90 points of eligible service, there's a reduction that applies if they don't meet those thresholds. What we're suggesting as we move forward is that we continue to provide the 30 and 90 component, but that we not allow people to take full advantage of the early retirement provisions until age 60. They can still retire at any point. They can still retire to a subsidized pension It's just the pension won't be as highly subsidized if they leave before age 60. There are a couple of reasons for this, and it really comes down in many cases to equity on one side and changing employment practices on the other. So the average member joins OMERS at age 37 now and has 11 years of service. In other words, the bulk of our membership will never qualify for benefits that they're being asked to pay for to subsidize payment of benefits to other people. And what we're also seeing is, with the longevity issue, is that our members are not, in many cases, taking full advantage of their earliest unreduced retirement date. They're continuing to work beyond those retirement dates, largely because they have different obligations, different financial needs, and anticipate that the income is more important on a regular basis, plus the accrual of additional pension as they begin to meet their financial obligations. So this is really just longer term, addressing the realities of our plan and not asking members to pay for benefits that they will never be able to take full advantage of. The next one is to remove the service limit. Again, this goes to longevity and the idea that people are looking to work beyond traditional retirement dates or earliest retirement dates. And so instead of capping service at 35 years, we're saying if people want to work beyond 35 years, they can continue to accrue a pension. They'll just have to continue to contribute to that pension as well, so that they can earn a pension beyond what they're earning today. And then there are two other plan changes that are up for consideration. One is the introduction of mandatory coverage for non-full-time members. Now, we don't have great data on this, but we imagine that this would enhance plan membership by up to 90,000 members, although we recognize that there would be a serious cost associated with employers. We do see it as a positive from a plan sustainability standpoint, though, through the extension of the membership base and helping to offset some of those reductions that Deloitte had suggested one way or the other. We are suggesting, though, that there be an opportunity for members to opt out if they choose to opt out, provided that their earnings are relatively modest. That is 35% of the YMP, or somewhere around $20,000 today. And then, as I mentioned, we're also looking at introducing optional opportunities for paramedics to negotiate NRA 60 benefits under the plan, largely an equity issue that would align them with police and fire, who are the other two, or two of the other three groups, one of who does not participate in OMERS, who is eligible for this provision under the Income Tax Act of Canada. So those are the changes as proposed. We do want to stress that there is a transition component in this, is that any of those changes, if adopted, would be subject to a 2/3 affirmative vote by the board. They are not baked, as I said. If they are adopted, they would be unlikely to be adopted, 1, 2, or 3, whatever they might be, before January 1, 2021, so that gives people time and us time to manage the administrative issues that would be associated with those plan changes. It also gives people time to consider the changes and the impact that it would have on them individually. We want to stress, and this is very important, that all changes are prospective. So that is, they apply only to service earned after the effective date. Everything earned before that date is treated as it was under the old rules. So, for instance, if we introduced, current retirees, therefore, would be fully exempt from the plan changes. They would continue to receive the benefits that they are receiving today, and that benefits that active members accrue up to that effective date, again, would be treated under the current rules. So, example, conditional indexing. If adopted, the members would receive the full indexing for the service up to the effective date. If they had 25 years of service before January 2021, they would receive 100% indexing on those 25 years. If they worked for another 5 years, the conditional indexing would only apply to those 5 years. So the attempt here, or the hope here, is to manage the transition as effectively as possible and to impact people as little as possible, and to ensure that they're actually receiving the benefits that they had anticipated they would receive going forward. So, those are the changes, those are the implications. What are the impacts? As we said at the beginning, revealing, is that if you'll recall this chart, we said that we would anticipate seeing Costs increased, normal costs in the plan, quite substantially over time from 17.7% to 22.5%. If the changes as proposed are adopted, that normal cost, the cost of providing those benefits, falls quite dramatically. So we dramatically increase the sustainability of the plan. The key here is that there's no attempt to strip those savings out of the plan. They would be used largely to help fund things like conditional indexing, but we just want to make sure that we have the flexibility based on those margins to manage the plan effectively, again, if we run into difficult financial circumstances. The proposed changes would provide a greater degree of cost certainty and affordability. Based on that, this chart says that under the current plan, there's only a 24.3% chance that the average contribution will fall below 22.6% over the next 30 years. Under the proposed plan, that jumps to 82.4%. The basis for that really is that it just ensures that the plan will remain cost certain and affordable as we move forward. And that the average portion of CPP granted, which is a big one, as we said, the hope is to provide as much indexing as possible. Our modeling tells us that we should be able to provide 63.3% of all of the indexing that would have been otherwise granted by 2030 and 86.3% by 2050. So again, we're fairly comfortable that we're being able to provide meaningful benefits to the members across the board, but on a more affordable basis. The last one is just to look at the member impacts. These are a little busy slides, but hopefully we can work our way through the themes. So if we're going to look at three fictional employees, one with long service, that is most of their service under the current provisions of the plan, one with split service, so half service under the current plan, half under the proposed changes, and then one with short service, so what would it look like if people accrued their pensions over the longer term under the new plan changes. So the chart as we see, the blue bars represent the current lifetime pension under the plan at age 55, age 60, and age 65. The orange bars are the new plans. The light blue bars are the bridge. Light orange bar, the bridge under the new plan. And then the gray bars are the top-up CPP. All we're really doing, is we won't get into the details, is to see the relationship between the old and the new. And as we can see, if you have long service under the plan, the message is pretty simple. You're unlikely to be impacted in any particularly negative way by the changes. In fact, if we get to age 65, you'll see that the new plan will provide slightly higher benefits because of the enhanced CPP. But we recognize that the guaranteed indexing and early retirement provisions come into play, but are again preserved for that pre-retirement service. So very limited impact if you're one of those people who are nearing retirement. At split service, we begin to see this change in mindset and change in distribution. By design, if we begin to look, members' combined benefit is lower at age 55. That makes sense because we're removing some of, or at least changing the early retirement provisions and biasing toward longer service members. But we see that by comparison, their pensions are much higher at 65. So there is this transition, again, recognizing the early retirement components of the plan and the enhanced benefits available on a combined basis through the new plan and CPP. And then if we look at a short service member, that is someone who has fairly limited service today and will earn most of their benefits under the new arrangement is, again, these are amplified. So we see at age 55, the benefit is significantly lower, but by the time they get to age 65, through the longevity and other issues we've talked about, the pensions become actually better from a lifetime standpoint. And inclusive within that is a higher level of CPP, which we know has historically been 100% indexed. So that's where we are. It's where we've been going, what we've been doing. So if we just quickly recap, why are we doing what we're doing? Well, it's our responsibility as a board. We're responsible for assessing the plan's health on a regular basis and proposing the appropriate changes to both benefits and contributions. I think that's what we've been doing based on the analysis that we've undertaken. Despite strong results, and we hear it all the time, why are you touching the plan when we're returning 11.5%? OMERS remains financially vulnerable. We're underfunded, and we know that we're going to be facing some challenges as we move forward. Like all major pension plans, so this is not particular to OMERS, we face a number of realities or headwinds that are beyond our immediate control, but we know will have a significant impact on the cost of the plan as we move forward, the big one being maturity. Left unchecked, the current cost of the plan will rise steadily over time and substantially under some scenarios. And this is largely what we're trying to address as we move forward. And then finally, if adopted, the possible plan changes will dramatically improve plan sustainability and affordability over time. And more importantly, we think that they will largely address the preferred preferences and needs of an evolving membership in the years to come. So that's it. I want to thank you very much for your time today and taking time to fully understand the comprehensive plan review. If you have any more questions around these elements, we invite you to visit the OMERS SC website at www.omerssc.com. We've spent a lot of time and provided a lot of information that will allow you to expand on what we've touched on today. So thank you very much.